The UK's Armed Forces Minister has warned the shadow of war looms as Europe must be prepared to deter Russia.
The Ukraine war has become a grinding test of attrition where movement on the map is measured in meters, not miles.
When U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was asked which allied special forces America trusts most, he didn't hesitate. He said, Britain, not France, not Israel, not Australia. Britain, a country whose army is now smaller than at any point in over 2 centuries, whose defense budget has been cut repeatedly, and whose own politicians have spent years publicly undermining the soldiers keeping them safe. So why does the most powerful military on the planet still treat a relatively small group of British soldiers as one of its most valuable assets? The answer goes to the heart of how modern warfare is actually won. And it's not what most people expect. Most people think it's about scale. Bigger army, more tanks, more jets, you win. That thinking made sense in World War II, when factories and manpower determined outcomes. But that's not how the most consequential operations of the last 30 years have been fought. Think about the missions that actually changed things. Killing Bin Laden, dismantling ISIS networks across Syria and Iraq, eliminating high-value targets before they could execute attacks in London or New York, rescuing hostages in the dark on the other side of the world with no margin for error. None of those were won with numbers. They were won with precision, intelligence, and operators capable of executing in conditions most soldiers never train for. The entire SAS regiment is one of the most feared military units on Earth, which has roughly 400 operators at any given time. The U.S. Army alone has over 450,000 active-duty soldiers. And yet, when America plans its most sensitive, high-stakes operations, it consistently calls London before it calls most of its other allies. That tells you everything about where the real value lies in modern conflict. In that specific kind of warfare, Britain's special forces are not second best. By almost every serious military assessment, they sit at the very top. Not almost, but at the top. The SAS has been running that kind of operation since 1941. That's not a sales pitch, that's just the record. David Sterling founded the SAS in North Africa in 1941 with one simple idea. A small group of highly trained men inserted behind enemy lines could destroy more German aircraft than an entire squadron of RAF bombers, without the losses, the cost, or the political fallout of a conventional assault. He was right. Those early SAS operations destroyed over 400 enemy aircraft on the ground and completely changed what a tiny force could achieve against a vastly larger enemy. The Americans paid attention. Closely. When Colonel Charlie Beckwith created Delta Force in the late 1970s, he didn't start from scratch. He had served as an exchange officer with the SAS. He studied their selection process, their training philosophy, their culture of self-reliance, and judgment under pressure. Delta Force was essentially built on the SAS model, and that exchange relationship has never stopped. SAS operators serve rotations inside Delta Force. SBS operators work alongside SEAL Team 6. American Rangers have passed SAS selection and served in assault squadrons. A decorated U.S. Recon Marine spent 2 years embedded with the Royal Marines Commando. This isn't symbolic. These units share skills, share tactics, and trust each other with their lives on actual missions, in actual war zones. That level of integration does not happen by accident, and it does not happen with just any ally. It's also worth understanding how British Special Forces is actually structured, because it's more layered than most people realize. At the top tier sits the SAS, the Special Boat Service, the SBS, the Special Reconnaissance Regiment, and the Special Forces Support Group. The SAS handles direct action and counterterrorism. The SBS specializes in maritime operations and is arguably the most secretive unit Britain has. The Special Reconnaissance Regiment runs covert surveillance and intelligence, gathering in denied environments, places where even other Special Forces units can't openly operate. Below that, the Royal Marines Commandos and the Parachute Regiment provide the backbone of Britain's broader special operations capability, with the Joint Special Forces Aviation Wing providing dedicated air support to all of them. Together, they form one of the most complete special operations ecosystems in the world. Part of what makes British Special Forces so consistently reliable is what candidates go through just to get there. SAS selection is widely regarded as the most demanding military selection process in the world. The process runs across the Brecon Beacons in Wales and into the jungles of Belize. Candidates carry loads of over 55 pounds across brutal mountain terrain, alone, in all weather, navigating without GPS against tightening time limits that are never disclosed to them. They don't know what the pass mark is. They don't know how many others are passing. The psychological pressure is relentless and entirely by design, but the physical phase is just the filter. What the SAS is actually looking for is something far harder to manufacture: independent judgment. The ability to make the right decision under extreme stress, without orders, without supervision, in ambiguous situations where the wrong call gets people killed. Most military training builds soldiers who execute instructions well. SAS selection specifically identifies and removes anyone who needs those instructions to function. That quality, self-directed judgment under pressure, is exactly what makes British Special Forces operators so valuable in joint operations with the Americans. Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 are built the same way. When these units work together, there's no cultural mismatch. They think the same way under fire. Fewer than 10% of candidates pass the SAS selection. In some intakes, the pass rate drops below 5%. That's not an accident. It's exactly what keeps the standard at the level that makes the regiment what it is. Hegseth at SOF Week was unusually direct. British Special Forces' contribution stretches from the Special Operations Executive missions of World War II all the way to operations happening right now. He called them one of the most strategically important military assets America works with anywhere in the world. That wasn't diplomatic politeness. Here's what the Americans actually get. The first is intelligence access. Britain's relationship with GCHQ, MI5, MI6, and the wider Five Eyes network gives British Special Forces operators an intelligence picture that almost no other allied force can access. When the SAS or SBS plans an operation, they're drawing on signals intelligence, human intelligence, and partner networks built over decades in countries where the CIA has limited or zero direct presence. Places like Iran, parts of East Africa, and specific communities inside Western countries that the Americans have to work through British channels to reach. GCHQ and America's NSA share a relationship so close that they effectively operate as a single intelligence architecture in many areas. That means when a British Special Forces unit goes kinetic, the intelligence underpinning that operation is often as good as anything the Americans have. And sometimes better, because British human intelligence networks in certain regions predate American involvement by generations. The second is what military professionals call operational reliability. When the US plans a sensitive joint mission, the kind where failure would be a political catastrophe, not just a military setback, they need a partner who will execute exactly as planned, maintain complete secrecy, and operate under pressure without requiring hand-holding. Britain is that partner. France is capable, but has seen intelligence leaks that burned joint operations in the past. Other allies excel in limited domains, but can't match the breadth. Britain shows up, does the job, keeps quiet, and goes home. In special operations, that reputation is worth more than almost anything else. The third is global reach. The British Commonwealth, Former territories and decades of diplomatic relationships give British Special Forces legal and logistical access to staging locations and intelligence networks across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia that would take the US years to build independently. When coalition forces were hunting specific networks in East Africa, it was often British operators working through relationships that had existed for generations, moving, gathering, and acting in places where American forces simply couldn't go without triggering a diplomatic incident. And the fourth, something that rarely gets discussed openly, is political and legal cover. Many sensitive operations require a non-American face. The politics of certain regions mean that direct US action is either would blow the entire operation before it would blow the entire operation before it started. There's a principle running through British Special Forces thinking since Sterling first wrote it down. Special Forces exist to have a strategic impact that 1,000 tanks and fighter jets never can. Removing one key bomb maker from an ISIS network can prevent attacks across multiple countries and save hundreds of civilian lives. No tank does that. Taking down a single financial facilitator funding terror cells across Europe shuts down an entire operational infrastructure that might have taken years to build. No carrier strike group gets you there. During the campaign against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, British Special Forces operators, working alongside American counterparts, were involved in targeting and removing key figures within the ISIS command and financial structure. These operations didn't make headlines. They weren't supposed to. But analysts tracking the subsequent collapse of ISIS's ability to coordinate and finance attacks in Europe have pointed to that sustained period of high-tempo special operations as one of the decisive factors in degrading the network. Britain also ran extensive special forces operations in Afghanistan that directly protected American forces. At peak deployment, British Special Forces units were running multiple direct action missions per night, targeting Taliban commanders, IED networks, and weapons smuggling routes. General Sir Rowley Walker, the former Chief of the General Staff, has publicly stated his ambition to make the entire British Army think more like special forces, more agile, more intelligence-led, more capable of outsized strategic impact per soldier deployed. That's not just an internal British ambition. It's exactly the model America has been quietly building toward for the last 2 decades. The UK isn't following American military doctrine here. In some critical areas, America has been the one catching up. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, and this part matters. Right now, in 2025 and 2026, morale in US Special Forces is reportedly high. The current administration has gone out of its way to support special operations units. Hegseth at SOF Week made clear that America's Tier 1 operators have full political backing from the top. In Britain, the opposite is happening. British Special Forces are being publicly scrutinized for operations in Northern Ireland, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Dangerous deployments made under extreme circumstances, often with ambiguous rules of engagement. Their identities have been leaked and splashed across the internet. Their actions have been second-guessed by politicians who have never faced anything more threatening than a difficult constituency meeting. Winston Churchill once said, "We sleep soundly in our beds because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who would do us harm." That quote has been on the wall of more than one SAS base. But right now, Britain's political class seems to have forgotten what those rough men actually do, and what it costs them to do it. The Americans haven't forgotten. That's the gap. And it's a strategic vulnerability that Britain's politicians seem completely unaware of. You cannot keep recruiting and retaining the best soldiers in the world if those soldiers believe their government will throw them under a bus the moment a deployment becomes politically inconvenient. The threat to this country, in the assessment of its own military and security leadership, is at its highest since the Cold War, possibly higher when you factor in state actors, terrorism, and the kind of gray zone operations being run against Western nations every single day. This is precisely the wrong moment to be undermining the people doing the most critical work. People like to debate whether the US-UK special relationship is real or just diplomatic theater. Here's the honest answer. At the prime ministerial and presidential level, it fluctuates. It depends on personal chemistry, political pressures, and whatever crisis is dominating the news cycle. But at the level of special forces, intelligence, and nuclear cooperation, it is absolutely real, and it has never fundamentally broken down. The operational core of that relationship rests on three pillars: intelligence, special forces, and nuclear weapons. In those three areas, the UK and US give each other a level of trust they extend to no one else on Earth, not their other NATO allies, not their Five Eyes partners, though Australia, Canada, and New Zealand are close. Britain and America specifically. That trust is not maintained by politicians. It's maintained by operators, intelligence officers, and military personnel who have worked alongside each other for decades, in the same operations rooms, on the same raids, analyzing the same intelligence feeds. When a new US president takes office and talks about the special relationship, he's describing something that has already been quietly running without him for years. Britain's SAS and SBS are the most visible part of that invisible machinery. America knows what they're capable of. America knows they can be trusted. And in the world of special operations, trust is the one thing you can never improvise. The British military is changing. In 2021, the Ministry of Defence announced a major reorganization, creating the new Ranger Regiment with 4 battalions drawn from existing infantry units and pushing the Royal Marines toward becoming a full special operations force rather than just a special operations capable one. These changes mirror reforms that America made to JSOC and SOCOM years earlier. The logic is straightforward. The wars of the next decade won't be decided by who has more tanks or more fighters. They'll be decided in gray zones: cyber operations, covert influence, surgical strikes, intelligence operations, and the kind of direct action that only the best-trained operators in the world can execute cleanly. Britain is trying to build more of those operators and ensure its Tier 1 forces can focus on the highest-end threats, Chinese and Russian state operations, rather than being consumed by counter-terrorism tasks that Rangers and Commandos can handle. If it works, it makes Britain's special forces even more valuable to America. And it keeps the most important pillar of the special relationship firmly in place, regardless of what's happening politically on either side of the Atlantic. The question isn't whether America respects British special forces. The question is whether Britain's own government will start doing the same before they lose the thing that makes these soldiers irreplaceable, not just to Britain, but to the entire Western world. What did you think? Is Britain doing enough to protect and support the people protecting it? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what we cover next.